On the evening of September 21st, loud explosions were heard in temporarily occupied Crimea. The occupiers reported strikes on the Terletsky boarding house in Foros and several other sites. The so-called head of temporarily occupied Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, wrote,
Several facilities on the territory of the Foros sanatorium were damaged. A school building in the settlement was also damaged. Unfortunately, there are injured and dead.
Soon after, Aksyonov clarified the information about the dead and wounded.
According to updated information at this moment, as a result of the UAV attack in the area of the urban-type settlement of Foros, 3 people have died and 16 have been injured.
Media analysts and internet users note that the attack allegedly targeted the sanatorium. There are also reports that an elite FSB dacha, where Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has personally vacationed multiple times, was attacked. Monitoring public pages, meanwhile, report that a government building in Crimea was hit. There is also information that the restaurant at the Foros sanatorium was closed for special service. According to Russian media, important guests may have been vacationing there. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, for its part, reported the alleged destruction of 114 fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles by air defense systems on duty. Meanwhile, it became known that on September 21st, GUR operatives eliminated 2 Russian amphibious aircraft in temporarily occupied Crimea. They were equipped with expensive equipment for detecting and combating submarines. This is the first case of such aircraft being destroyed in world history. Another Mi-8 helicopter was also hit.
The Kremlin leader declared that Russia is ready to respond to any threat from the West, not with words, but with military force. Putin made these statements during a meeting with members of the Security Council of the Russian Federation.
Russia is capable of responding to any existing and newly emerging threats, responding not with words, but by employing military technical measures.
Putin cited as an example Russia's decision to abandon the unilateral moratorium on the deployment of ground-based intermediate and shorter-range missiles. In particular, he said that this was supposedly a forced measure since similar American and other Western-made weapons have been deployed in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. Although in reality, Russia had been deploying intermediate and shorter-range missiles before as well. In February 2019, US President Donald Trump announced that the United States would begin a 6-month process to withdraw from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty due to Russia's long-term violations of its terms. In August of the same year, the treaty was terminated after both parties withdrew. Putin also reminded that on February 5, 2026, the treaty between Russia and the United States on measures for the further reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms will expire. According to him, Moscow is ready to adhere to the quantitative limits for another year, provided that the United States acts similarly and does not take steps that would undermine or violate the existing balance of deterrence capabilities. The day before, US President Donald Trump stated that he is disappointed in Putin and is convinced that Russia is losing the war. He also promised to protect European countries from possible actions by Russia and said that he does not like the intrusion of Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace.
On September 21st, NATO fighter jets once again had to intercept a Russian military aircraft. This time, it was Germany's turn, reports Reuters. 2 German Eurofighter jets were dispatched to track a Russian Il-20M reconnaissance plane flying in neutral airspace over the Baltic Sea. On September 19th, 3 Russian MiGs had already violated Estonian airspace. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, called this incident an extremely dangerous provocation. After the airspace violation, Estonia summoned the Russian diplomat and officially began consultations with its allies regarding Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty. At the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense cynically denied that its aircraft had violated any borders. Tallinn initiated an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council due to the Russian provocation in Estonian airspace. It will take place on September 22nd. This is the first time in Estonia's history that it has been forced to convene the UN Security Council. Meanwhile, Czech President Petr Pavel called on NATO to respond militarily to Russian provocations. He noted that if Russians violate the airspace of NATO countries, it is actually permissible to shoot down Russian planes. Meanwhile, Donald Trump stated that the US will not stand aside if Russia continues to escalate tensions on NATO's borders.
The US will help protect Poland. If Russia continues to escalate?
It is known that on the night of September 10th, 24 Russian drones entered Polish airspace. During an interview with French President Emmanuel Macron, a CBS News journalist asked him whether he considered these incidents to be mistakes. Earlier, US President Donald Trump had suggested this. The president of France said that he does not believe in such a coincidence and thinks that Russia wanted to highlight NATO's weakness.
It is absolutely clear that Russia is a destabilizing and aggressive force in Europe. This is not a mistake. This is simply a project aimed at destroying as much of Ukraine's territory as possible, achieving victory in Ukraine, and simply emphasizing what they want: NATO's weakness.
Macron also noted that although Donald Trump is making significant efforts to bring the war in Ukraine to an end through peace negotiations, organizing a summit in Alaska with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, there is no sign that the Kremlin leader wants to end the war in Ukraine.
The defense forces are advancing in the Dobropillia direction. This statement was made by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky. On his Facebook page, he noted the progress of Ukrainian soldiers. According to Syrsky, over the past day, control was regained over 1 kilometer and 300 square meters. The armed forces of Ukraine also conducted a search and destroyed the enemy over an area of 2 square kilometers in the Pokrovsk district of Donetsk region. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine added that assault units in certain directions advanced from 200 meters to 2.5 kilometers. Syrsky stated that in total, as of September 22nd, 164.5 square kilometers have been liberated during the operation. More than 180 square kilometers have also been cleared of enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups.
Control has been restored over 7 settlements. 9 have been cleared of enemy saboteurs.
Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that after the counterattack on Dobropillia and in the Pokrovsk area, 330 square kilometers of territory were returned to the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Of these, more than 170 have been completely liberated from Russian troops. According to the head of state, the occupiers wanted to encircle Ukrainian forces, but the defense forces are doing everything to destroy the enemy. Zelensky suggested that it is in this direction that Russian troops will concentrate their main efforts in order to hold their positions. He noted that the 61st Marine Brigade of the Russian Federation had been deployed to the region.
Colonel General Alexander Lapin, who led the Center Forces Group from the start of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine and was later transferred to the Leningrad military district, has been dismissed from military service. Russian media report that Lapin will become an aide to the head of Tatarstan. After the Russian troops retreated from Lyman in the Donetsk region, Lapin was criticized by the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, who called the general an incompetent person protected by top officials in the general staff. Meanwhile, news agencies have noted that the Zapad 2025 exercises, which the Kremlin always uses as a show of strength and political bravado, were marked by an unexpected personnel gap. During the final phase of the military exercises in the Nizhny Novgorod region, where Putin was personally present, the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, was absent. This time, the General Staff was represented by the Commander-in-Chief of the Ground Forces, Andrei Mordvichev. Given that Gerasimov has attended all such events since 2009, his sudden disappearance is a signal, the news agency emphasizes, and notes that Gerasimov's public absence from such events is a symptom of a process occurring at the top of the Russian command. Meanwhile, Ukrainian defenders are counterattacking in the northeast of the country and achieving successes that could help disprove the occupiers' claim that the Russian Federation's offensive cannot be stopped and that Kyiv must agree to a deal. This is reported by the New York Times. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the liberation of 7 settlements covering 160 square kilometers in the Pokrovsk and Dobropillia areas. According to him, Russian forces have suffered more than 1,300 killed in this section of the front.
Russian propagandist Margarita Simonian spoke about how she is doing. On her Telegram channel, she responded to a subscriber's question about her condition. Simonian wrote that she would love to say that everything is fine, but she won't lie. In particular, she reminded readers about the condition of her husband, Tigran Keosayan, who has been in a coma for 9 months now. The propagandist added that she would be wearing wigs, hinting at hair loss after chemotherapy. Tigran is still in a coma, and I am undergoing cancer treatment. What's good about that? Soon you'll see me in wigs. We'll choose together which one suits me best. About 2 weeks ago, Russian propagandist Margarita Simonian underwent surgery. She shared this on her Telegram channel. Earlier, on propagandist Vladimir Solovyov's show, Margarita Simonian said that doctors had diagnosed her with a serious illness. She did not specify her diagnosis, but hinted at a mastectomy.
In the time since we last saw each other on the previous broadcast, in this past week, I have been diagnosed with a terrible, serious illness. Tomorrow I have surgery right here under this medal.
The Moscow Times reported that the head of the propaganda outlet Russia Today, Margarita Simonyan, might even leave her position because of cancer. According to the publication source, the question of whether she will continue working is being discussed, and the possibility of her departure is being considered. It should be noted that propagandist Margarita Simonyan is known for her aggressive rhetoric directed against Ukraine and Europe. She approves of Russia's war against Ukraine and supports the regime of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Simonyan also regularly appears on Russian television channels, where she voices Kremlin narratives. Her husband, Russian director and TV host Tigran Keosayan, has experienced clinical death and is currently in a coma. He is also known as a propagandist and supporter of the Putin regime.